so we'll have a few more people. Hi, Cynthia.
Hello.
Hi, Remy.
Hello. Turn my camera on here in a second.
All right, I'm letting people in. Just a quick intro before we start. Remy is our sales rep. She will help us to follow up any sales call messages, help us to get people to know more about Palo and potentially bring Palo to their schools. Cynthia is our advisor. She's going to join our webinar and she's going to share her valuable wisdom and practical advice to all the counselors who are struggling. Right, we'll wait for a few more minutes so I can let everyone in. We have some interesting questions from our attendees. They put their questions in our registration form. So some of them are asking, how do you decide which data is valuable? They even asked that if we have the database, I don't know what that means because this was to go to get the data from the school IT department. A lot of them just want to know what the practical way to get the data, analyze it. And then they also ask question if they should use a Google form, which is a very valuable and simple tool to use. We'll go over that in the webinar as well. They're also asking if there's any universal screener. I guess the knee assessment could count as one. A lot of them just asking how can they collect data. Some of them did ask about how they can using their counseling programs to just using data to increase the collaboration in their counseling program. Some of it asks specifically how do they monitor their language learner in their population, and then how much they have grown. They also ask how they can effectively share data with their stakeholders. So a lot of good questions, and then I believe that we're gonna cover almost all of them, and if we don't, then we can cover in our Q&A. Hi, Arlene, welcome. Hi, Priscilla. Hi, Phyllis. All right, so we'll wait for one more minute and we'll get right into it. All right, we'll get started. So thank you for everyone for joining us today. We did our webinar about data collection and how to analyze school data about a month ago. And when we receive great feedback, a lot of people are requesting resources from us. So we decided to go a little bit deeper and talk about how counselors can create data-driven school culture. This webinar will have a lot of, well, I'll say 60% overlap from last time. So if you miss our last webinar and you're here to catch up to see all the resources, they will be here. We'll also send out the resources and slide to you for you to share with other people. But today, we're also going to cover how can you effectively use those data to creating a data-driven school culture. And counselors, you have a pivotal role in terms of how much data do you see? All the counselors probably see the most data among other faculties, right? Teachers are busy in the classroom, they have a lot of observations, and then other positions might be a little bit remote from counselors, but counselors have the ability to not only do but whether it's bus duty or lunch lady, you'll be able to see your students. And besides that, you also have access to all the school data. You just have to ask. And so today's webinar, we're going to focus on the idea that how do you leverage your pivotal role in terms of the accessibility to data, and how can you use those data to um, derive smart goals so that you can start sharing those goals with the other people, um, whether it's your principal or because you want to start a school program, or teachers because you would like to help them out a little bit. And how do we leverage your data position to make you more powerful? Before we jump in, I want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. We're Palo SEL, and we are specific designed for middle school. And the main differentiator from us and other SEL vendors out there is that we are your partner. And we see SEL as a process, not just a curriculum. It is a process that involves principal, counselors, all the admins, and of course, students as well, and teachers. And we believe that SEL has to be a collective effort. We have to find a way to sustain the effort throughout the whole middle school year for the students to really install the idea and then be able to practice those important life skills. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm Michael Cho. I'm a director of research at Palo SEL. I help Palo to develop research to make sure that we have the most effective SEL for middle school, whether it's to make curriculum more relevant or make the content more engaging, and most importantly, make an impactful SEL solution for your school. And today I have the honor to have Cynthia with us. She's an ex-school counselor. She now is a podcaster and life coach to help teenagers and counselors to I'll let her to introduce herself and tell us more about her. Cynthia, go ahead.
Hello. I apologize for my voice. I have a cold, but I'm feeling okay. But I was a school counselor for 25 years and I was in education for 31. I was a special education teacher as well. And so I'm here to just talk about how I used things, data and how it worked as in my school as a school counselor. And I still work with teenagers as a life coach.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love to inspire youngsters to develop more skills and be more independent in their own life. And then hopefully I'll get into that line of work as well. And then as you can see this small microphone over here, that's the sign for our discussion. And so if you can turn on your camera, and we'll love to have a discussion with you. And this is your cue that we're gonna throw some questions at you, and Cynthia is also gonna share her wisdom and practical advice with us. So don't be shy and jump on the discussion if you may. If you're a little shy, feel free to use the chat function in the Zoom. We will rally your message and discuss with the group. Right. So first of all, when a word comes to mind, what word comes to mind when you hear about data? We'd like to do this activity with everyone just to kind of get your mind into the space of thinking about data. I personally love data. I think data is a very efficient way to see what's going on around us. Perhaps a very good way to objectively think about a problem. And I think most importantly, when you have data, you can dive deep into it, right? You're basically looking for patterns, different ways. But that's enough about me. I love data. I can talk about all day. What do you guys think about data? Feel free to type in the chat or just unmute your mic and share that with us.
I found it to be confusing and time consuming.
Yes, yeah, we heard a lot about that. And then now a questionnaire on our registration form, a lot of counselors say that they don't know how to analyze it. They don't know where to collect it. And that's something that we're going to go over today. Arlene, I saw, Arlene, nice to be here with us. Would you like to share how do you feel about the word data?
I think that we're overwhelmed with so much academic data that SEL data and counseling data tend to take a back seat and doesn't always get as much time as it should.
That's a very good point. Yeah. And in fact, that's while I was doing research on all the different common challenges from counselors, that's exactly one of them. That you don't get to spend enough time with SEL data because schools often stress on academic a lot. And then we'll definitely cover that. Hopefully, we'll get some insight from this. All right. So, oh yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, so if you want to, if you're late to the meeting, we're talking about what word comes to mind when you hear about data. Feel free to enter your thought into the chat. We're gonna move on. Right. When people come to think about data, the first thing is where is it? I think that it's a counterproductive way to look at data because you can't always make sense of data. But if you don't have a concrete initial question to ask, the data, it's very unlikely to help you. It's almost like you're trying to complete a giant puzzle, but you don't know what a picture is. First, you have to understand what a picture is, and then you can start looking into how do you piece puzzles together. And so before you start collecting data, I think the first question we need to ask is, what is your question? What are you trying to answer? So some of the example questions that I copy and paste from ASCA website is that, for example, why is there a higher percentage of African American students underachieving? Or is the mentoring program helping students to achieve higher standards? Or does group counseling focus on study skill? Does help students to increase their standardized test score? Those are some of the questions that you can ask. And then once you have that question, then you will have a good idea of where to look in the data. And then the next portion of it is how can you make that sense for other stakeholders, not for you, because it's obvious for counselors, you're exposing to a lot of data, but not everyone is as data versed as you guys are, even though sometimes we don't think that we're well versed with data. But in fact, counselors might be the most well versed person to data, or besides your IT people, but they don't know how to interpret that, right? They can get you the data, but then you probably have a good interpretation. But how do you make sense for your stakeholders? That's something we're going to talk about today. Right. So once you have your question, what you're looking for in the data is quite simple. Right? You're looking for two things basically. Is there any inequality in the student achievement? So for example, earlier, is African American students achieving less than other group of students? Or can you identify student needs? Maybe you look into data and realize that for some reason, right before Thanksgiving, all the quiz and test grade dropped. Maybe they need some morale boost. Maybe they just can't wait for Thanksgiving holiday season. And then you have to kind of give it a little push to say, hey, the semester's not end yet, and we still have quiz and tests coming up, right? What are the needs? Or let's say you walk out the hallway and you realize that there's a student who is looking down, a little bit upset, and you ask him what happened, and then you realize that there's a bullying issue in your school. And that's something that you have to figure something out for them. But they all conclude under these two questions, which is what are the inequality among students, and then what are the needs of students. Sorry, we still have people joining in, so I'm just letting them in. However, this is only the first step. We're not gonna cover the further step, but we will have a series on this, since we see a lot of counselors have interest on how to use data. Once you're able to identify the inequality in student needs, there are more things you can do with data. For example, resource allocation. I'm sure every school has limited resources, and then to decide which one to prioritize, which one to put the most time and resources to it is very important. And once you have that data, you can decide how to allocate resources effectively. It can also use for accountability for improvement. So let's say you install a program, let's say Palo, right? You want students to engage, you want 80% of students to attend to Palo curriculum because you spend your money for it, teachers are spending time having students to log in. If you're unable to see the data, you won't be able to hold teachers accountable or per se help students accountable to engage the curriculum. And lastly, when you're meeting one-on-one, I'm sure every counselor has encountered this before. Like, what's going on with this person? I need to spend about 20 minutes to investigate. Imagine you have data ahead of the time that you already know what students is going through. Maybe not specifically, but maybe it's family related. So you can start asking around about the family instead of start asking like, how do you like school? Why don't you like school? Why don't you come here? Maybe that has nothing to do with the problem, and then you know how confusing middle school students can be, and then so if you're beating around the bush too much, they might confuse themselves. All right, so I have a little microphone over here. Feel free to participate. But these are some of the common challenges that counselors are facing. And then I'm sure every school has its own difficulties, but here are some of them. And then we're gonna tackle the one that I put in both. So there are a lot of things, right? A lot of counselors saying that they did not receive enough training in the graduate program, and they need continuing education. And I'm sure that's why we're all here. There are challenges in accurately analyzing and apply data findings. As Arlene pointed out, there's a lot of academic data out there, and then perhaps that pushes away a lot of SEL data. However, academic data is a very important indicator of inequality, or perhaps a way to start looking what are the special student needs. There's some privacy concern, access for reliable, comprehensive data that actually give you information. There's a little time to development, as some other pointed out, that there's too many other responsibilities, and if you need 3 hours on data analysis, your school might not understand that. Why is that important? And that kind of goes to the next point that whenever you want to implement data, if you don't explain to your stakeholders, especially from your admin, they might think that you're not using your time well because they don't understand what's the importance of it. And sometimes it's not even they don't want change, it's because they're afraid of seeing data. For example, we often talk about this. It's like when you have the information, you basically need to take action. And then if you don't take action, there's precaution to it. So that's something that we'll have to think about. But however, in general, data is always a plus because you don't want to hear the news without knowing nothing about it. And if you have data ahead of time, you can prevent something horrible to happen. Right, so I'm gonna take a break. Cynthia, can you share your top challenge among all this, or maybe it's on your own, when you want to talk about data with your admin? And then if you can share some advice, how do you make your admin to be a little bit more data driven?
Well, I think the main concern that I had was just that very like the fear of change. And we did, and I worked in a high school most of my time, but we did a senior exit survey, and kids were saying a lot about they felt like there was a lot of racial injustice in our school. And the administrators didn't want to hear that because it's not good. And so we had a lot of trouble trying to get them to understand, even though this is what kids were saying, they just said, well, those were disgruntled students that were saying that. It wasn't like it isn't really a problem. And it was just because they didn't want to acknowledge that it really was a problem. And so I think when you can connect the data to something, an academic goal, unfortunately, or something that the school is really trying to work on as a district, or as a goal that they maybe have with their superintendent or the board or something. If you can connect the things that you want to do, showing that those goals will also be improved, they're much more likely to care about it because it affects them. When it's something that you're wanting to do as a department, but they don't see how it connects to what they're doing, that's when they, I think, have a harder time following along.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anyone else who would like to share their challenges? Free to unmute or type in the chat. I just have one comment on that. I think Cynthia, you pointed out something very important. And then again, we're going to cover that later in the webinar as well, is how can we increase collaboration between stakeholders? And then I think the critical thing is alignment. If you can align with your stakeholders, then they will listen. Because I imagine that every role in your school has piles of tasks that you need to work on. And then if you're coming to me and ask me to do something additional, that doesn't help with my current task. It's just another thing on my plate. No one's going to really help you. That sounds really bad, but I do think this is what collaboration is about. It's about aligning goals together, and then you're striving as a team. And so, Cynthia, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very insightful point. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about how do you collect and how do you analyze data. We'll talk about how can you align your insight with your school goal and mission, which Cynthia already pointed out. Thank you. And lastly, how do we enhance collaboration in school counseling, right? You're not just there to say, hey, this is what data says, and you have to do this. You're really there to say, hey, this is what data says, and since you are having this issue, let me help you out because I might have a solution. And I think that is an approach to collaborate. And as you start building those, I guess, data acquitted, the next time when you bring data to them, they will listen. So earlier I mentioned that you, a school counselor, has a pivotal role for data. And this is all the different ways that you can use data in your school. You are there to drive change due to your unique access to not only qualitative data, which is your observation when you're walking around the campus, right? No one gets to do that, right? When there's a class time, everyone's busy, you're probably busy, but you can walk into any classroom if you want to. You can talk to anyone if you want to. So that quantitative data is there. And then you have quantitative data where you can access to whether they're academic or reports of incidents and things like that. You also have a unique position to understand the entire student, not just their academic. And then that's a very different perspective from teachers' view. You also serve as a consultant, sometimes a leader in data interpretation. So people come to you, right? When people come to you, ask you about what does it mean when I see this, you also acquire a data point. So as the center of the like a consultant for all the school issues, you do have more data just naturally come to you. There's a lot of data to analyze and to collect, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But do understand that you as a counselor do have the pivotal role, and then probably only you has this role. And so it's especially crucial for counselors to leverage their data interpretation and help out to identify school needs and inequality among students. All right, so let's talk about how do we collect data. I'm gonna keep it simple. If you do want to know more detail into this, you can come to our website, and I believe we have the webinar recording. You can click in. But basically, there are two categories. There's low effort data that we can simply get, for example, your student learning data, the test score, the GPA, their attendance, whether they have office referrals, maybe they are being reported for some school safety incidents. Those are low effort. Those already exist in your school system where you can simply just ask around and then you should be able to acquire it. There's some more high effort data that you can collect. That means that you have to get out there, for example, and administer a need assessment. And that means you have to talk to your stakeholders and ask them to say, hey, can I borrow 5 minutes of your classroom time, in this case, teacher, and I would like to administer this need assessment, or maybe you want the whole school to participate. And that requires a bit more effort because you have to talk to people, you have to schedule a time, you have to collect information, analyze that. Some school have school climate survey that you do either twice a year or once a year. That does require some initial effort, but once it's in place, you do get it once a year. So also look into that. And personally, I love the observation of early sign. I think this is what counselors are born to do. You walk around, look at people, observe students' behaviors, and if all of a sudden there's a dynamic change in the hallway because it's a Friday, is it Halloween coming up? Is Thanksgiving coming up? Or something happened at the corner of the campus that you didn't notice? And I think that it's the counselor's gift, right? Because we're all relationship builders. We all know what each student is kind of up to, even though you might not know their names, but you recognize their face. You kind of notice things that are different. And those are usually the best data point for you to collect. Once you have all that, then we can start thinking about how do we analyze data. And then just have to remember this framework is 2 for 2. Well, actually 2 questions and 2 analyses that you can run on. The 2 questions you want to ask is, once you have the data, and I know it's all unorganized, but when you look at it, you want to ask yourself, what does the student data tell us? And of course, that has to relate to the original question. Are you investigate underachieving African American? Are you investigate the efficacy of your school programs? What question you're trying to ask, and then you ask yourself, what does the student data tell us? And the second thing, which we kind of covered earlier, is how do you allocate your resources and time? So you want to ask, where should we focus our effort? This is going to be a tier 1 effort, tier 2 effort, or you got to refer the student out because it's outside of your expertise. And 2 analysis that you can do. One's the big 5 and a root cause analysis. And there's many different ways to think about this, but what you're ultimately trying to find out is that what are the patterns is there, right? If you can identify a pattern, you can interpret a pattern, and then you can make a data-driven decision. It's not that complicated, but you just have to try to look for things that are different, and maybe you don't spot any pattern. That usually means a good thing. But if you see there's a dent in your chart, then maybe something happened over there. If it's just all flat, maybe it's good, and then maybe you want to do a different analysis, look for different things. All right, so talk about the big 5. I mean, we all been to college, and then we all have written essay like this, and then first thing we want to think about it's what, when, where, who, why. Right? These 5 things will be able to give you a clue of what does the student data tell us. Right? When you look at what you're looking at, okay, what are behavioral problems? Do we have a lot of classroom disturbance, or do we have bullying happen in campus? When does it happen? Does it always happen on Friday, lunchtime, or right after school? Where does it happen? Right after school at the basketball court, right after school under the I don't know, when I was in high school, a lot of bad kids were under the bench of our football field. So maybe it's there. Um, who's contributing it, right? Is it a senior one causing the trouble, or freshman, or a particular group of student? And why is behavior problem occurring? Well, it's because they are lashing out from the stress from the family, or they feel like they don't belong in school, and then they want to cause troubles. We can ask that. And once you get to the why, then you're getting close to the root cause analysis, right? You want to ask why multiple times. So in this case, our problem is, let's say tier one program is not effective. And you can ask why. Okay, students are not attending. You can ask why again. Why is student not attending? Maybe it's the teachers are not facilitating it, or students are unable to focus because of anxiety. And you ask why again. Oh, maybe because they miss a year of school and did not learn all the coping skill to cope with their anxiety. And then you continue to ask why, and then eventually realize the tier one program is not effective because we have to help students to develop those skills, and perhaps whatever that tier one program should be more fundamental, right? Maybe it should be, instead of putting them into like an after school academic boost camp, you might want to start with the SEL curriculum, or just have a mindfulness hour once a week, something like that. Cynthia, would you like to share a case where you will be able to use either root cause analysis to discover something that's profound, not so obvious, or you can share when you use the big five, either one.
Okay. We had a new student. Well, we had new students all the time, but we had a new student that came to school and they were in foster care. So, of course, they get moved around a lot. And they were having a lot of trouble in the math class, like right away, and continuing to have trouble and refusing to work, running away from the room, things like that. And so when we kind of did some of this root cause analysis and asked questions and talked to them more, we realized that it was a trauma. They were sitting in like the middle of the class because it was the only empty seat left when they were new. They weren't part of the original seating arrangement or whatever. And so they were having a trauma response because people were behind them, and their fear and anger were triggered by people being behind them, and they didn't know what was happening. And in a lot of questioning and things that we did with the student, we finally realized that it was just because they didn't like someone behind them. They didn't know what was happening behind them, and it scared them. And so we put them in a corner where they had like walls around most of them, and they could see everything that was going on in the classroom in front of them. And then we stopped having the behavior problems. So a lot of times it's just questioning, and teachers don't have time to ask all those questions because they're teaching the class. So we, administrators and counselors and different people, helped with that to find out what is really going on.
That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing. I do have a follow-up question, Cynthia. How did you identify a student in the first place? Did you see any discrepancy in the data? How did you identify the student and approach to her and do the more of the analysis?
Well, it started out with just the teacher, and this student also had an IEP. So there was a second teacher in the room, and they both were coming to me like, this kid keeps running out. They're, throwing their books down, or they won't do any of the work, and we don't know what to do, or we don't know how to help this situation. And so then I pulled them out separately to talk to them. And I don't think that they even at first realized exactly what it was about the class. They just said they didn't like it and that they were uncomfortable in there. And then we just it was kind of like using that why, well, why are you uncomfortable? Well, when you were in this room, why were you not uncomfortable? And just, continuing to ask really specific questions about what was each situation and when they were functioning. excuse me, when they were functioning, what was good about that, and then what didn't work in that particular math class. So we just kept, it's part of kind of like the collaborative problem solving, where you just keep asking deeper and deeper questions to get to what really is going on.
And so what I heard is that you did not just interrogate a student. You basically interrogate everyone and then ask
Right.
like, why do you think she does this? And then you also ask her like, why are you not able to sit down still and things like that. You did ask the IEP teacher, the second teacher, and the primary teacher in this case.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I think this is very, very important because sometimes you don't see what's in the classroom and then you don't see a lot of records out there. But as a counselor, you have every right to ask them. And the people are happy to share with you because they want their problem to be solved. And that's why I keep emphasizing that counselors have the pivotal role to access to all data, because your position in the school is to hear everyone's problem and then you're kind of solving it for them. And that really gave you a position to hear everything. And so once you are able to understand the root cause, knowing where, when, how, why does it happen, then you can start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? Well, what are you going to do? Right. So you can think about, in Cynthia's example, it's a student level intervention. And then the intervention sounds scary, sounds like a huge program, but really it's just to move her to the back of the classroom and understanding her, what is the cause of her in stillness in the classroom. You can also think about, okay, how about staff level intervention? Maybe it's lack of training. Maybe it's just one idea, right? Instead of um, uh, immediate make a judgment. I mean, for teachers, maybe teacher can always practice something that I always do is tell me more, right? And then sometimes you just say, tell me more, student will just reveal something that you never thought of, even though it has nothing to do with what you're currently talking about. But if you're patient enough and ask them, tell me more, student will tell you more. And maybe this is some sort of training that counselor can develop because they know how to probe, they know how to get to the bottom of the things. And hopefully you don't get to need to think about school level intervention. This is what we talk about tier 1 intervention, and that requires a lot of stakeholder buy-in. And it might be the most important thing, because if you're able to accomplish the tier 1 level, tier 1 intervention, you're basically helping all the students at once, and that can really elevate your school's performance. However, it does require a lot of stakeholder buy-in, and then you do have to convince them, hey, this is a campus-wide issue, and then we have to deal with it. And here's what data tells me, and here's what I propose as a solution. So, how do you get those stakeholders to collaborate? We are going to provide all the resources. So if you see like, oh, Smart Goal, I don't want to do that. Oh, ChatGPT, I don't know what that is. We already figure out for you, and then we'll share the tool in a bit. But the flowchart goes like this. First, you have to go out and search data, right? And once you have all the data you can acquire, whether it's from your school system or from your own tools, need assessment, your own observation, you keep track of notes and things like that. You want to conclude them into three different categories. One's area of concern, and then you should be very clear about what this is, whether it's academic, whether it's behavior, whether it's something else. And the earliest, Cynthia also mentioned that you have to align with school's goal and mission. So understanding what your school is trying to accomplish, and what does your principal want for this year? And lastly, your school profile. What are the strengths that your school have? Maybe you guys doesn't have a lot of counselors, but you have a lot of teachers who are very helpful. Maybe you don't have maybe teachers are really busy, but you do have a social worker who work with you, who are able to help you out. So what are different strengths? Maybe you have a very supportive principal who are happy to push any sort of tier 1 intervention. So once you have that ideas, then you can just plug it into a school SMART goal prompt, okay, which I'm going to share with you guys. And then once you complete that prompt, you can feed that to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, if you haven't heard of it, it's probably already took over the school by storm. Student maybe shouldn't use ChatGPT too much, but we should use ChatGPT as much as we should. And if before counselors don't know how to organize data because you just cannot point out any concrete numbers of how to change it, ChatGPT will enable you to do that. So basically, you don't have to be so data-driven thinking. You can feed to ChatGPT, and because ChatGPT is an analytical tool, it will help you to analyze your area of concern, school goals, and your school profile. And it will generate a series of small goals based on the data that you feed into it. So think about this two-step is the magic wand that you can just cast magic and you have a bunch of small goals. And once you have small goals, then it's a lot easier to collaborate. Right? And then I'm sure that this is not going to be the first time you're writing a small goals, and you probably were being asked to write a lot of small goals like this. But once you have our tools, you'll be able to generate tons of small goals. The ChatGPT will help you to brainstorm what the goals to implement, and then you can start your intervention and collaboration. All right, before we gave you guys the tools, let's talk about what are different actions that you can start your collaboration. So there are many things in this, but I want you guys to start still thinking about what I highlighted earlier. You have a pivotal role to all the data, and then you are a consultant in your school, and that's basically enable you to do all this, right? So what you can do is that you can develop specific skills to assist students with special need, depends on the problem that your school is dealing with. You can ease education level transition for students. So let's say students is gifted, they're moving ahead or dropping down, you can figure that out. But there's a lot of things, I'm not gonna go over this. For Cynthia, can you give us some practical advice, or maybe just a quick entry action for counselors to start collaborating? I remember you mentioned the idea that if you can help out teachers more,
Yes.
teachers will
Well,
happy to buy in.
building relationships with the teachers is, number one. And I had a teacher that, the special education teacher was getting upset with this regular education teacher because they had a visually impaired student in the class, and the student wasn't getting what they needed from the class. And it was because, as I investigated and went to talk to the teacher, they had all of their materials on paper, and they didn't have anything digital. And this student needed to have materials digital so they could be enlarged on their device so they could see them. And the teacher was like, well, I don't have time to change my entire curriculum into a digital curriculum. And so we had student aides in our office that, didn't always have things to do. And so I trained one of the student aides to take all the paper materials and put them into digital form, which was just putting it into the printer and having it create PDFs of all of their paper materials, and had them put it into a file that belonged to that teacher. And so then when the teacher had an assignment, they could just go to that file, find that digital version of their paper material, and send it to that student. And so it was just a way to help them with their time and help them to see that there was, they knew that they needed it to be digital, but they just didn't have time. So I problem solved to find a way for them to have the time to do it.
Yeah, that's great. I think counselors do have a lot of expertise, and then a lot of time you guys are probably spending more time to upgrade your skills rather than, compared to teachers who are busy teaching students. And a recent study reveals that some teachers find more support for the teachers, including a full-time school counselor, is more appealing than 10% salary increase for themselves. I find this stunning. Because I know teachers are underpaid, but I can really see that they're really there for their students. And you can see that if a counselor can make their job a little bit easier, when the next time when you are asking for favor, they will return the favor. And that's what collaboration it's about, right? Um, so counselor can do a lot of things for teachers, and I also suggest all counselors out there to start collaborating with teachers. They have the front row seat with the students. So in any case you would like to start something, you have to start with the teacher. Teachers also become a very good resource of your data. If they don't trust you, if they don't think that you're gonna make use of the information, for example, in Cynthia's case, if a teacher come to her and ask her, "Hey, I have the student who just can't sit still, she can't focus," they're like, "Okay, I got it," and then you never really act on that. You're not gonna continue to come to you and ask for help, and you won't receive that information. So the different way to collaborate with school teachers, as Cynthia gave us two great examples, right? You can assist classroom behaviors, change strategies, or offer academic support resource, and then tell them how do you accommodate students' needs. So I want to encourage you all to collaborate tomorrow. And once you start collaborating, you will know that there's a lot of data out there for you to collect. And then we'll quickly get into the source, the resources that I promise you that we'll present. Right. So if you're new, get to know your teachers. Doesn't have to be getting into a classroom, but organize faculty gatherings, discussing counseling roles, and letting them know what your expertise, how can you help them. If you already know the key stakeholders, that means that you have some wielding power in school. Then you can actively participate, but you are there to collect information. So active listening and then offering solution can be your best friend. Help new teachers to come in, and then just help teachers to reduce their classroom disturbance. I think most of the teachers will really appreciate that, because they need time to teach, and then classroom management is often very tough. All right, we're kind of running out of time, so I'm gonna quickly go over this 90-day data-driven SMART goals. So let me share this with you. We will share this resource with everyone after the webinar. If you want it, please type in your email in the chat, and then we'll share that with you. Or you can just send me an email later and requesting this. We'll show you the slide deck and this 90-day action plan for you to get started. So it's straightforward. The goal is to collect enough information and then formulate small goals for your stakeholder based on your school profile, area of concern, and there's one more thing, right? And here's all the material that you can go through. So basically just follow through this. You start with the data collection, and what are the best way, what are other way to start with tracking down your observation already, right? So there are two ways you can do observation. If you identify certain individual has a sudden change in academic performance, behavior, sleeping, weight, interest, things like that on your hallway, then this will probably give you a good clue of something has happened to the student. Whether you want to step to a classroom and do a little bit more observation, or inviting students to come to have a light-hearted chat, it's up to you. Or if you want to do a school-wide, and then you are still observing the same thing, you're just looking at student as a group, and then you are keeping track of them week by week. So this will be a good resource framework for you to follow if you want to start doing observation. We also prepare a Google form, which we all love. I adopt the Department of Education from, I believe is I think it's West Virginia. There's a district, they created this knee assessment form, and then you can find other states version, but they're almost the same. So if you don't have time to create another Google form and then you would like to administer a need assessment, come here and then make a copy of this, right? So if you don't know how to make a copy of this, we can also send it to you, but feel free to come here and check it out, or just make it for yourself. But this covers the assessment on personal level, the school level, and then how do they feel about getting support from school. And that should give you a pretty good pie chart of how many students, for example, if they need help handling teasing or being bullied, or they feel like they have something happens in their family structure. And then you want to ask what, when, where, who, why. And once you get a pretty good sense of where they are, why it's happening, when does it happen, then you can start asking about why. Like, why does this happen? And make sure you engage with all the stakeholders, not just interrogate the student. That'll be quite scary if you just do that. And then you want to examine what intervention is needed. Is it at the student level, staff level, or the school level? And once you have identified that, you then can rely on this ChatGPT prompt. Here are the instructions. And all you have to do is fill in the brackets, right? What's your counselor student ratio? How many times you get a week? What's the leadership focus of this year? Again, aligning with school missions and goals. Whether you have constraints, what are your strong resources, and what are your area of concerns, right? What's the current state based on what you have learned from your data? What would you like to improve? I would like to improve academic performance by 0.1 GPA, or you would like to reduce absentees, or you want to reduce school incidents from 5 to 2. Whatever you want to improve, you can include in there. If you don't feel like you have adequate enough data to make sense of it or generate a goal, then you can just simply remove it. Okay. And once you complete this, you can copy and paste the whole thing into ChatGPT, and then the ChatGPT will be able to analyzing what your inputs are, and then generate small goals for you. Do remember to go through the SMART goal. Just don't just take it for what it is. Try to understand what it's about and then modify accordingly. But this should be able to get rid of the process of brainstorming SMART goals, and then you can just pick and choose, see which whatever makes sense for your stakeholders. And once you have that, then you can start talking to stakeholders and start designing the intervention and the implementation process. Right. So let me get back to the presentation. Here you go.
Michael, Phyllis asked about how to access the Google form, and I'm sure that they will get an email with all the resources in it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. You guys will get email to this form. I mean this sheet, and then all the links are attached to the sheet. So you'll be able to access the form from the sheet that we're gonna share with you. Okay. Thanks for asking. That's a good question. All right. So hopefully the word that comes to mind when you hear data, it's now more positive. Perhaps you're excited about bringing more data-driven decisions to your school, creating a data-driven culture with your stakeholders, and we're here to help. So if you feel like there's too much work implementing tooling, getting an administrator to collect information for you, we have something called Counselor Dashboard. And what this Counselor Dashboard will do is we want to save your time from walking the hallway. We want to save your time to talk to teachers, engage with your stakeholders, because we have technology. So how Palo works is that we offer an SEO curriculum for students to learn from. And then while they put in the inputs and expressing themselves, for example, we ask them, how are you feeling today? Or we might ask them, like, do you feel lonely at school? Do you have friends? things like that will be able to give us student insight where we will populate on your counselor dashboard. So as you can see, if you click on KO in this case, of course, this it's a pseudonym. You can see that the students, they have been uncomfortable in the beginning of the year and then starting calming down like that, and then it shoots up again. And then you not only can see the mood changes, you can also see different responses that they wrote. In this case, seems like the students is a little bit hopeless about their performance and they don't like themselves, and maybe this is something that you would like to address with the students or with the teacher. So that's all for the webinar, and then we'll have a Q&A after this. But if you're interested to look into what Palo does for your school and how we are an SEL partner to you, not just an SEL vendor, please scan me here and then make an appointment with us. Or we also have a URL here. You can click on Remy, if you can share that in the chat so people can have this access easily. You can schedule one-on-one, and then we'll show you more into how does the SEL curriculum connect to your counselor dashboard, and how can you utilize counselor dashboard to become more data-driven and be effective in your own practice. All right, we're open to Q&A. I know we don't have a lot of time, but thank you for everyone staying until the end. I hope you guys get a bunch of value out of it, and I also really appreciate Cynthia sharing your wisdoms and practical advice and some great examples. So to help you guys to see what is it like to work with data as a counselor. And so we will be here for another 5-10 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, you can unmute yourself or simply type in the chat, and then we'll try to do our best to answer them. If not, then make sure to leave us your email so we can share this resource with you. Other than that, have a nice, today's Wednesday. Have a nice Wednesday. I hope today is another smooth sailing, and looking into your data and start collaborate. Have a good day, guys. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions. Okay, I'll take that as a compliment. Go have fun with the data, and let me know. We're gonna dismiss this webinar, and we have webinar every month. So don't forget to check our website, and then looking forward to see you guys again next month. All right, thank you all. Thank you, Cynthia. We'll talk to you soon.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.